morning and what they're doing. So I will find out. But yeah, tell me the times and then I'll let you know.
Yeah. It should all be more concrete tomorrow, and I'll message people out and stuff.
Lovely. Hi, Norman. Welcome.
See, I've only got a little. I've only got a little tablet, so I can only ever see 4 people at a time. Oh, it's Norman.
Yeah. Am I too early? Because I just got a note on the chat saying I'm on shortly. So,
yeah, no, you.
Who the I am, I don't know. But
let me see. That might be me. Yeah. So we're going to wait until there's a couple more people in, and then we shall begin.
Oh, the world is always beginning.
Okay. Several people said they're interested, but we'll see what happens.
Who knows? Not going to start without John being here, because I'll slap him otherwise. Stephen, he shall appear. Hey, Peter's here as well. Hi, Peter.
Hello, I've got there.
Hello, Mr. Monk.
Hello.
There we go.
You will excuse me. I'm just going to leave you for a minute because I'm going to get my milk. All right.
Yeah, you go and do that.
What time are you actually starting?
We're going to start probably in the next couple of minutes.
Right, I'll get my milk.
We'll start by 7 past at the outside. That's
right. Okay.
There's enough now.
How are you, John?
That you've dropped the G. It's storytelling.
Hey, Mr. Prince.
There's a G up there.
Oh, I see. Just hanging around the side.
It's pasta con frutti. Mare.
You sound like you're in a goldfish bowl, Baden.
Oh, he's gone.
Baden there.
We've lost him.
Gone. He's like frozen. Oh, no. You need a Wi-Fi booster, man. That's what you need.
Oh, now I've dropped off.
Have you? Oh, good grief.
Yeah, what's happened here? All I can see is just a black screen. It's just back to meeting. Oh, I've got it back now.
Good grief. The gremlins are out in force tonight. That's the problem. We tell them mysterious Suffolk tales from Suffolk and then
yeah,
asking for trouble.
Well, you don't want to get into all that Suffolk stuff.
I know. Do you know what? I've been trying to get the accent. It's going to be dodgy again, I'm afraid.
Yes.
I've been going through it, but it's still. Do you know, when I grew up around here, I had a proper broad Suffolk accent. I had to learn not to have it.
That's what education does for you, girl.
I know, it gets rid of it.
Education does. Yeah.
My old pain.
Yeah.
Oh, I love a dodgy accent in a story. It really makes it for me.
I know. All class, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hey, Ruth, thank you for joining us. We're going to start very shortly. I was just seeing your thing in the chat, Norman.
Yeah, I should say listener.
Well, we got Ruth and we got Leo.
Who else we got?
Well, if audience is plural.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's interesting. I like audience though. I kind of.
Oh yeah, no. I used to quite often have a single, because of the nature of where I told at a children's program, because I just wandered around under the trees. I often had only one listener.
Yeah.
So I came up with this word to describe one listener.
That's lovely.
And I don't think I'm original with that. I think others have come up with it too.
Yeah. I love that though, when everyone comes up with like the same word at the same time. You know what I mean? It's like, so because I'm autistic and I use the word autist to like be an autist. But a friend of mine came up with that, and I was like, oh, I like that because her son's an autist as well. But then lots of other people around the world had come up with that word. You know what I mean? It's just, I guess it's because it's the obvious thing, but it's quite nice that we all kind of went, oh yeah, that thing,
Yeah.
Like audience has that ring to it, doesn't it? It's great.
It does.
Oh, right.
It's good to see you there.
It always comes to mind. You don't like.
The hair's looking lovely, Peter.
What?
The hair's looking very nice.
I know.
I love, Peter, that your hair matches your cloud on your background. That is genius.
All right.
I've never seen that done before.
Artistic.
It's beautiful.
Brilliant.
That leaves a space.
Hi.
That leaves a space on there for me food. Lovely.
Lovely.
Hello, Baden.
Hi, Peter. Good to
All
see
right.
you.
Good to see
I'm
you.
good.
Good.
I was on the book today.
Oh, yeah.
Check
We'll
you
talk. We'll talk.
Hey, Abdul.
Well, I've got my voice. I've got laryngitis at the moment.
Oh.
Oh. Hey, see, do you know what? It's not a story session until someone started their knitting. Thank you, Rick. I feel better.
Who said?
Great.
Oh, bless.
Do you know what? It's really tempting when you're telling to get your own out, but I just feel like it would distract me. And I've only got a scarf on the go at the moment. Don't want holes in my scarf. It's that. Alrighty. Do you think I was going to start and then Peter wandered off again?
That's all right. I'm going to be doing that because my meal's not here yet.
That's all right then. And someone else is joining us. There we go. And I'm now spotlight. It confuses me when I spotlight me. Can I go back together with you? There we go.
Oh, it's Wendy. Hello, Wendy.
Oh, the lovely Wendy.
Hey.
Wendy,
Fantastic
when you going to do a
performance
set for
last
us,
night,
Wendy?
Wendy.
Oh, thank you, Baden. That's really means a lot. Thank you.
Loved it. Mm.
Cool.
Wendy, can I ask Wendy a question before we start?
Of course you can.
Because a lot of my emails have gone down the tube, and and I think I emailed you about being on this, Wendy. And
did you?
And you probably didn't actually ever get the email.
No, I don't think I did.
Can you message me on my Facebook or something, and then with your email address and everything, and I've got an email address that's working now. What was a Gmail one? And so my apologies, I wasn't ignoring you. I know you got in touch with us about 300 years ago.
No, honestly, that's yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I've only don't worry about it.
Yeah, no.
It's full of excuses, Wendy. That's what it is. Full of excuses.
Yeah. Well, I've been trawling back, seeing who did I send to and who didn't. Which hole did it go down?
Right,
so while I've got you there,
enough admin, enough gossip, because otherwise we'll do that all night. We'll save that for after the stories. So, welcome everybody. Oh, Julia's made me scream really big. It's a bit weird. So for any of those that don't know or that I haven't met, hi everybody. My name is Justine de Mierre, and this session tonight is kind of a very soft launch for a project that's kind of been bubbling in the back of my head for ages, called Storm from the East. So I am from East Anglia. I moved to East Anglia when I was 5 months old, spent pretty much all of my childhood, teenage years here, and kind of did the whole London thing in my 20s and came back in my 30s and been here ever since. So although I'm not born and bred, well, not born East Anglian, I am bred East Anglian. And the reason that I wanted to have this project called Storm from the East was to really celebrate East Anglian culture. Storm from the East is actually a title of a trip-hop album from the early 90s, I think, by an East Anglian label called Moving Shadows, and do look it up. It's an amazing album with stuff that's just incredible. And I love the idea of Storm from the East, that it was culture that came from the East and was kind of pushed out to other people, because sometimes in East Anglia we can be seen as a bit of a cultural backwater, and the actual amazing culture that we have in storytelling and art and music, people will kind of forget where it comes from. It sort of goes out into the world and kind of loses its tail. So Storm from the East is about celebrating that, and I thought, actually a good way to start off is East Anglian stories, and particularly tales of Suffolk, because Suffolk is kind of where I grew up. So tonight I'm going to tell a couple of tales. I'm going to start off with one. I'm going to hand over to Shane in the middle of this, who is going to tell a Suffolk tale as well. Shane has escaped over the border to Essex, but he's a Suffolk boy at heart. So
I am indeed.
him back in. And he's still an East Anglian lad, so that's all good. I'm just going to put in the chat for you guys if anyone wants to chuck some coins in the virtual hats, which will be shared between me and Shane. There are a couple of links there, one to my page, which has a hat on it, and one to the PayPal link. So if you want to chuck some money in there to support our families, food, shelter, therapy, whatever it is that takes us to be here tonight, that would be most appreciated. Okay, let's start with our first story. So my first story tonight is from a little village in Suffolk called Bungay. And Bungay it's a little town near Beccles, and I grew up in Beccles. And Beccles and Bungay have this kind of rivalry going on. There's the Beccles and Bungay Journal, which is our newspaper for both of us. So I was kind of like in a strange situation because I was a Beccles girl who went to school in Bungay. And my mum was a teacher there, so that's why I went to school there. And every school morning, we would get in like my mum's little brown Mini. And I would sometimes be allowed to sit in the front seat. And she would be smoking her consulate out of the window. Always the smell of that, I remember. And we'd drive over these little rolling hills from Beccles to Bungay, and we go past Puddingwell, and go past the Barsham sign. And as we got into Bungay, you'd see on the right-hand side there's a little pink cottage, and had a little wall with lots of flint in it. And as you got further into Bungay, you could see sometimes in the buildings the coat of arms of Bungay. And it had on it, I used to notice when I was a kid, it had on it at the bottom a black, like dog kind of monster-like creature. And it seemed like a really strange thing to have on a coat of arms. And on our journeys into Bungay, I used to notice it, you know, just this image, sometimes in buildings, you know, just around the place. And there's a weather vane that has it as well. And as a kid, I always wondered, you know, what it was. And I went to a good Catholic school and had a good Catholic upbringing, so I knew better than to ask at school. But as I got a bit older, I started to hear the stories of Black Shuck. And I love the stories of Black Shuck, and sometimes people forget with him that the origin stories, because Black Shuck became in stories this monster, this creature, this scary thing. But he starts as a puppy, washed up on the shore and looked after by a soldier, and when his owner dies, he's set off wandering around Suffolk for years, decades, probably centuries. And that always kind of, you know, the sightings of him around Suffolk carry on, sometimes even to this day, where I live now in Woodbridge. There's a story from the 1950s of him being at Melton Crossroads. But this story is the story of the last time he was seen in Bungay. And it goes like this. Some 400 or 500 years ago in Bungay, it was very early in the morning. It was before 9 o'clock, which is very early for me. And it was midsummer. It was the middle of August. But the sky that should have been one of those beautiful Suffolk cloudy skies with the bright sunshine coming through, it was almost like it was night. And the dark rain clouds came over. And as the rain started to fall, it fell into the churchyard in St. Mary's. And in St. Mary's Church, just behind the largest of the gravestones, was Black Shuck, sheltering from the storm. And he felt those drops on his long coat, and he knew that his old bones should find somewhere to shelter. And when he looked towards St. Mary's Church door, he saw that the early morning worshippers had left it just ajar when they left. And so he checked that no one was looking, and he quickly went in through that door. And he padded his big paws down the aisle of the church, and he saw the altar covered in the altar cloth, and he slipped underneath the altar cloth, and there put down his head, and he went to sleep. It was about an hour later, and old Mary and old Jack, because it's always old Mary and old Jack, they were walking on the path for the morning service in St. Mary. And old Mary, she looked up at that still dark sky and she said, "That's been a rum old August." And old Jack looked up and he said, "That's been a rum old summer." Because it had. Instead of it being that warm sunshine beating down on them for the whole of the summer, it had been these dark rain clouds and rain and hail like the world had flipped upside down. And old Jack and old Mary, they walked along the path and they came to the churchyard. And they looked up, and up on the roof was the church warden, Joe. And Joe was fixing a tile on the roof. And Jack looked up at him and said, "Come in then, Joe." Joe said, "Yeah, be down in a minute, just fixing this one." And Mary said to Jack, "He won't come in. That boy's a heathen, not seen him in this church in years." Well, Jack and Mary, they went in. They walked down the aisle, they took their place in the pew, they made the sign of the cross, they knelt down. And behind them, the other parishioners started filling up. And as the parishioners filled up, that fine morning became darker and darker until they could barely even see themselves in the darkness in that church. And the rain started to beat down. And then it was time for the start of the service. And the priest, he came out and he walked up to the pulpit. And everyone was murmuring there was something in the air with the rain coming down and it getting darker and darker. But nonetheless, he began. "Dearly beloved," rumble, 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 rumble. The thunder rumbled, the whole building shook, and the parishioners looked at one another and looked back at the priest. Said, "Be calm, my brethren." He began again. "Dearly beloved," flash! Lightning lit up the whole of the church and then plunged it into darkness again. The parishioners looked at one another, looked back at the priest. The priest silenced them with his hands, and he tried to begin a third time. "Dearly beloved." Crack! And the lightning hit the side of the church, and the whole church lit up. And Black Shuck, who had been slumbering till then, suddenly, in the fear of the noise and the light, jumped out from underneath the altar cloth, and there he was, his eyes flashing, and he looked to the parishioners, and their eyes in fear shot back at him, and he was so scared, and they were so scared, and he started trying to make his way out of this church, and he slashed right and left, and just trying to get down the aisle, and he went to the door, and he poured, and he poured, and he poured at the door until the door flew open, and then he ran, and he ran across the marshes through the town until he was gone and gone and gone. And back at the church, the door was just swinging on its hinges. And then suddenly a voice broke the silence. "Everyone all right in there?" And Joe, who'd been up on the roof, came in. And when he looked around, the parishioners, as if they didn't know what had happened. Oh, Jack and Mary, where they'd been kneeling, they were frozen. Eyes open, hearts stopped. The parishioners began to look around to see the damage. They could see the claw marks on the end of the pews. They saw one young man lying in one of the pews with a scratch down his back. No one really remembered what happened next. But somehow, the parishioners, they carried that young man back to his house in the town. He never quite recovered and was the man he was before, but the people of Bungay, they looked after him. He never wanted for anything. He was fed and he was looked after. Eventually, when his time came and he passed, the people of Bungay worried that keeping alive this young man is what had kept Black Shuck at bay. And so that's when they started to put Black Shuck, the images of him, around the town, as if somehow it could keep him from coming again. And maybe it worked, because here we are some 400 or 500 years later, and there's been no sightings of him since. But then, sometimes I think right now, it's like the world is tipped upside down. And we might just be due another rum all summer. There ends my tale.
Whoa.
Thank you very much.
So are the claw marks still, are backlash shucks marks still on the door of the church at Bungay?
I have been to St Mary's. In fact, my brother got married there, and yeah, there's definitely something in that door. They say at Blythburgh as well, which apparently happened on the same night. There, right? You can definitely see the scorch marks in the door there as well. So you can go and find the
There's
remnants.
a witch stone in the witch stone in the churchyard there, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love.
It's a funny old place.
That's a funny old place. Suffolk's a bit odd. Mr. Monk.
Can I say something?
You may.
3 weeks ago, we cremated my first cousin, and she was a Bungay.
Ah.
Not only was she a Bungay, her name was Bungay. She came from Bungay, name was Bungay. And there was a fact, there's always been a trust fund. People named, or so I had to understand, or people with the name Bungay, who come from Bungay, a trust fund to go to whatever. In fact, it went to, work out, my niece. I don't know, there's so many cousins I've got. One of them, anyway, to get her through theatrical makeup school. So it was a charitable fund. So I thought, put that in, she hadn't mentioned Bungay. I was switched off now, keep your mouth shut.
Bungay looks after its own, that's very true. So for our second tale this evening, I really love this story, but I don't tell it, and I knew Shane did beautifully. So I'm going to hand over to Shane to tell you a little bit more about this story he's about to tell you.
So I'm going to move it so I don't have to look at myself. So I can see some of the audience. So I come from Suffolk. I was born in a town called Bury St Edmunds, but I spend. Sorry.
Didn't even know it was dead.
So I spent most of my time out in the countryside because I lived on the edge of the town, and I always went out into the countryside. And really, this story, the countryside is going to tell this story. But my father used to tell me stories. You know, I had the Three Little Pigs and Red Riding Hood, but he also used to tell me about the White Lady, the Grey Lady rather. And I was fascinated by the Red Barn murder, but I'm not going to tell any of those stories. This is the story from a little village up the road from where I lived. And when I was a teenager, if we went to one of the villages, to one of the dances, boy, did you know it was tribal. And so, yes, so if you came even from the next village, you were an intruder. And that's how I want to kind of set the ground for this story, really. Now, for those who don't know Suffolk, in the winter, the land is brown, it's earth. In the spring, the land is green, it's the crops growing. And in the summer, it's golden yellow, because the crops are coming to fruition. And this was in the summer. There were two poachers out on the land, coat tied with a bit of string, collar up, nets and snares in their pockets, and they were walking the hedgerow in the shadow of the hedge, slowly and quietly, because they were going to go poaching for some rabbits, maybe if they were really lucky, a deer. Well, they went along this hedgerow, and the field kind of narrowed, and they nipped across the narrow part of the field to get to the other side, and they went past the spinney. When they got to the other side, they went into a wood, and they walked slowly and quietly in this wood because they were in stealth mode now. They were hunting. They were hunting for food, something to subsidise their diet. And as they walked, the main poacher, he stopped his friend and he said, "Can you hear that?" "No, I can't hear a thing. There's something in this wood," he said. "Anyway, let's carry on." And on they walked. And they walked a bit further and a bit further. And then the poacher stopped his mate again and he said, "Can you hear it now?" And his mate said, "No." He said, "There's something in this wood. Something in this wood that's not normally here." Well, they walked a bit further and the poacher stopped his friend again. And he said, "Can you hear it now?" And he said, "I can." He said, it sounds like a child crying. Maybe it's a caught rabbit that's squealing out or something, but it sounds like a child in the wood. Well, on they walked towards where this sound was. Well, in this village of Woolpit, there are pits around the village. And there they were above a pit full of bramble and briar and thorn. And the sound was coming from down there. So the poacher, the main man, he pushed his way through the bramble and briar and nettle, and he got down there. And when he got to the bottom, he took a step back and, "Get down here now," he said to his mate, "Get down here now. You won't believe this." And his mate scrambled down and he looked, and his mate stepped back and said, what is that?" And there were two children crying, cuddled up to each other, but they were quite different. They were green skin, green hair, green nails. "Well, this ain't right," said the poacher's mate. "Come on, let's leave him. Let's just get from here." And the poacher said, Whoa, these are children. We can't just leave these children here." "Yeah, look at me," he said. "Look at me. We can't leave them. They're children." And the poacher called out to the girl, who was about 7 or 8 years of age, and offered his hand, and she shied away. And he spoke very gently to her, and she took his hand and he pulled her out of that pit. And then his mate grabbed the boy, or went to grab the boy, and the boy completely pulled away. He was very scared. And the girl spoke to him, her brother, in a language that the two men didn't understand. And then the boy let the man pull him out of the pit. And they got to the top, and they began to walk out of that wood, across the field and along the hedgerow. And the poacher's mate said, "Well, what are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with these two kids?" And the poacher said, "We'll take them to Woolpit. The villagers there will know what to do with them." "Oh, all right," he said. So on they walked down those old dirt tracks, as they were in those days, up that little slight hill towards Woolpit. Well, Woolpit was a village, a wealthy village of wool growers and what have we, and farmers, and there were small farmsteads everywhere, oak buildings with thatched roofs, and in the middle of that little village was a stone trough where the horses would drink and any news would be shared. And that's where they were heading. Someone looked out of their window at their little cottage, and they saw the two men and these two children. "What the hell? Have a look at this. Hey, have a look at this," the wife called to her husband, and he came and he had a look out the window. "What the hell? This is going to be interesting." Down they went out onto the centre of the little village. By this time, several neighbours were out as the two men arrived with the two children. And the villagers looked at these two children, and in one voice, they said, "Get them away from here. These children are the work of the devil. Get them out of this village." The two men had to turn on their heels with the children and walk away. Someone picked up a stone off the road and threw it at them as they went and left the village. "I told you," said the poacher's mate. "I told you." "We're not leaving them," said the poacher. "We're not leaving these children." "What are we going to do?" said his mate. "We'll go to one of the big houses, one of the posh houses. One of the people there will know what to do." So they left the outskirts of Woolpit and they went up that steep hill up toward Elmswood, with the church up in the distance. And there was a house, a fine house, with wrought iron railings and a row of lime trees. And they went down that drive and up those steps, and they knocked on that large door, and the maid of the house opened the door. And when she saw those two children, she screamed and demanded they get off the land, and she slammed the door. The two men, the children, turned and walked away. "I told you," said the poacher's mate. "What are we going to do now?" The poacher said, "We're going to go and see Sir Richard." "We can't. We poach his land." "We're going to go and see Sir Richard. He will know what to do with these children." So that's what they did. They walked up to Sir Richard's house, a huge house with taller wrought iron railings, a longer row of lime trees, more steps, a larger door, and they knocked on that door. And Sir Richard himself opened the door and he looked at them. "What have we here?" he said. "Sir Richard, we found these two children in the wood. and we don't know what to do with them. Well, bring them in, said to Richard. Can't you see they're hungry and they're thirsty? Bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. And he called to his servants, bring some food and bring some water through. And they set up a little trestle table and they put some food and some water for the children. But the children didn't touch anything. So Richard tried to speak to them, and to him they didn't appear to understand. He was an educated man. He tried his Flemish, and the children, they didn't seem to understand. He tried his Latin. The children didn't seem to understand. The children just stood there. Sir Richard's wife joined him in the grand hall and wanted to know what these two children were. And Sir Richard explained the situation. Well, they need to eat, she said. Just at that moment, the door went. The maid was coming in from the garden, and she had a big wicker basket full of vegetables from the garden, and she walked across the hall. And the lady of the house noticed that the girl was following her with her eyes, and she stopped the maid and she said, "Maid," she said, "take the basket to the child." And she went over and she offered the vegetables to the child, and the lady of the house said, "Have something, have something." And the girl picked up a green bean still in its pod, and she bit into it and she spat it out, for it was stringy and tough. And the lady of the house said, "Let me show you, my dear." And she went over and she popped that pod and showed her the green beans inside. And the girl began to eat them. And she ate and ate and ate. The boy, he didn't eat anything. Well, Sir Richard and his wife agreed that they would look after these children. Sir Richard said, well, they clearly need to learn to speak English, and they need an education, and they need to follow the way of God. So he made arrangements for all those things to happen. Well, the little girl, well, she quite enjoyed where she was. She would go out into the garden and she would wander further afield, and she would go into the little local woods and she would pick wild flowers and what have you. The boy, he stayed in his room. He wouldn't come outside at all. The girl began to try different foods. She began to learn English. She began to enjoy herself. She loved the stories from the Bible. The boy, he stayed in his room. He wouldn't come out. Well, you know, time doesn't stand still for anybody. And time just moved on, and the girl began to blossom a bit more and a bit more. The boy didn't. He became paler and paler, until one day he died in his bed. Sir Richard called the vicar and said, "We have a child to bury." And the vicar said, "He hasn't been christened. We can't bury him in the churchyard." And Sir Richard said, "But we have to bury this child somewhere." And the vicar said, "There is a piece of land, a scrap piece of land at the back of the church. He can be buried there in an unmarked grave." So that's what they did. One day, Sir Richard sat there and he was chatting to the girl, and he noticed that she seemed a bit paler than she was before. He noticed that perhaps there was a little bit of blonde in her hair. And he thought, my friends need to see this child before she changes. So he arranged for all his friends to come around, and they had a grand meal. And after they'd had the meal, he asked the girl if she would come in and speak to his friends, and she agreed that she would. And he said to her, "Tell them your story." So she told them her story. She said, "Well, I come from quite a different land to this. We don't eat our animals. We don't have a full sunshine. We have what we call a gloaming. It's as if the sun wants to rise, but it doesn't fully rise. And one day, one of our lambs escaped, and me and my brother, we went out walking to try and find him. And we went to a place that we'd never been before. We went deep into the woods and we became lost. And we found our way into a little cave, and we continued to walk, and the cave narrowed and lowered, and we began to crawl. And there was a light at the end of the tunnel, so we continued to crawl. And we heard this beautiful sound that drew us further and further. We didn't know what it was. I do now, of course. It was the bells of the church. And we just carried on crawling and crawling. And when we stepped out at the end of the tunnel, the sun was so bright. We stumbled and we couldn't see. And that's when we fell into the pit. And that's where the men found us. Wow, said the small audience. Wow. And they thanked her. And off she went to go and play or do something or other. Well, as I say, time keeps moving forward, and time moved forward, and she began, well, she was no longer a girl, as she wasn't quite a woman. She was in that phase of, you know, kind of in between those two phases. And she was beginning to catch the eye of some of the local boys. Sir Richard knew there could be a problem, and he thought she needed to be married. As was the tradition in years ago, he thought she needs to be married. So he summoned his best friend from King's Lynn, who had a fine son. 2 days carriage ride. They arrived eventually. Well, as in many fairy tales, as soon as he saw that young woman, he fell immediately in love. And as soon as she saw him, she fell in love with him. Sir Richard gave them a fine dowry for their marriage. And they moved to King's Lynn to live. It is said that they had 4 children. None of them were green. It is further said that they had a happy, good life. It is also said that she never ever forgot her little brother. And that's the Suffolk tale of the green children.
Oh, thank you, Shane.
Shane, that's amazing. I've known that story for 40 years and I've never worked out how to tell it. And it's a beautiful telling. Thank you. Thank you. Warpit's fantastic. Gorman from the Scaffold opened a bakery there years ago.
Okay.
Amazing village.
Yes, it is an amazing village. The story's at least 800 years old.
Yeah.
It was written down by the chap from I can't remember his name, from Coggeshall, a Christian man from Coggeshall. He wrote down the bones. I can't think of his name.
I think as
well. He wrote a stack, didn't he?
Yes, he did write a stack.
Around the same time that for any of you that were here for my last live set, the Wild Man of Orford is from a similar time, so you can check that out on the site. We kind of have a history in Suffolk of strange people coming from other places, which carries on to this day. If you know about the stories of the UFOs at Rendlesham, I don't know what it is about this place that attracts people from other lands, but it's kind of cool.
It's the beauty of the countryside.
I mean,
another Suffolk tale. One that I have to share with you is, So let me start kind of where I got this story from. So about, must have been 12, 13 years ago, I decided I wanted to be a storyteller. I'd met a storyteller, and I didn't kind of know that that was a job at that point. And I kind of met with a friend of mine who was an artist who'd been on the same project where I met the storyteller. And I said to her, do you know what? I want to be a storyteller. And I kind of think that I have been, because so all the way through my performance career, I'd been an actress before. I'd always been playing storytelling characters. I worked at the Museum of the Moving Image, and I chose to be a Scheherazade, who was in the 1930s. They were the people that told the stories of the films to the movie moguls to see if they were going to be made. And as soon as I said this to my friend, she was like, "That's great. I've got a group of children you can tell to, and I'll pay you this much." So as soon as the words "I want to be a storyteller" were out of my mouth, there was a job that came with it, and I thought, well, that's good. I'll carry on with that. But when I first started, there wasn't kind of all the different storytelling clubs there are now, and I went on the internet to look for a storytelling circle, and I came across a group called the Gipperswick Storytelling Circle, and that was all that was out there. And this is where I got this story. Yeah. So Gipperswick Storytelling Circle, they used to meet in the, and they still do actually, first Monday of the month, in the back of the Margaret Catchpole pub. That's another good Suffolk story. And it's there that I fell in love with East Anglian storytelling, because East Anglian storytelling has a kind of, irreverent nature to it. I mean, they were very kind to me on my first telling, but if you were in that story circle and you were known, you kind of had to fight for your story, because the heckling that came in, if there was the slightest bit of innuendo, somebody would be in on it. And I used to go to those nights and I used to laugh until I cried. And it was just really glorious. Run by a guy called Robin Hearn, who I think John's going to try and get on the site at some point. But this story, I have to tell you, is one of my favorites that I got from there, because it's an oral story, and it's not kind of, I don't know if it's been written down anywhere now, but certainly when I collected it, it hadn't. And it was told to me by a guy called Terry who went there, and I was always really jealous of Terry, because Terry was a podiatrist, and he spent his time going to old ladies' houses and doing their feet. Like sorting out all the calluses and everything. And I know that seems a weird thing to be jealous of, but as I think we all know in the storytelling world, old ladies are the keepers of the stories. And if you happen to be spending an awful lot of time with them, then they tell you their stories. And this story that I'm going to tell you is just one of those stories that was told to Terry, and he told to me. And it goes like this. I live in a place called Woodbridge, and I'm right on the edge of a place called Martlesham. And in Martlesham today, up on the, like, what was the heathland, there is like a Tesco's and Pets at Home and a Next and a Poundland. But many hundreds of years ago, that was all farmland. And in this story, a couple of hundred years ago, that farmland had just been bought by a farmer. Farmer Brown had had a really, really good year, and he'd had a bit of profit, and he thought, I know, I'm going to get myself like 2 or 3 more fields, and I'm going to plough them up, and I'm going to make my fortune. So he bought his fields, and he was sitting back in his farmhouse, and he was rich enough to send his ploughmen out to do the job for him. And the ploughman went out, and they started ploughing the field, and Farmer Brown was just waiting for them to come back at the end of the day to say the job was done, but they came back after about an hour. I said, Farmer Brown, look, we're ever so sorry, but thing is, we can't get a plough through it. Like, that land, it's got all little bits of stone in it, little tiny stones. You're going to have to get the stones cleared first. Farmer Brown said, don't worry. He was feeling quite flush still, you know. He said, go down to the village, get all the children to come up, and they can pick up all the stones, you know. Get the women, get whoever will do it, they can pick all the stones out of the field. So that's what happened. All the people of Martlesham, they took their baskets and they went up to the field, and they picked up all the tiny stones out of the field until it was nice and clear, and they took all the stone baskets and they put them in front of Farmer Brown's house. Farmer Brown went to sleep that night. He woke up the next morning. He thought, right, now I can start on getting my fields all sorted. But the ploughman went out, and they tried to get the plough through the field, and after about an hour they came back and they said, Farmer Brown, it's like no one cleared them. You know, there's still all these tiny little stones. The horses can't pull the plough. We just can't do anything for you. And Farmer Brown started to get a bit irate. So, well, they obviously didn't do a very good enough job yesterday. Go and get them and get them to do it again. So all the villagers of Martlesham, they went out and they picked all the stones out of the first field and the second field and the third field until it was completely clear. And they tipped all those baskets of stones outside Farmer Brown's house. Farmer Brown went to sleep that night. Thought, right, tomorrow, 3rd time lucky. But well, you know what happened. He sent the ploughman out again, and sure enough, all those little stones were still there, and they couldn't get the plough through them. Well, Farmer Brown was at a loss to know what to do, so he did what many fine men do when they know they're at a loss to know what to do. He went to the pub. He went to the Red Lion, which is a few hundred yards that way. And he sat in the Red Lion and he drank pint after pint after pint after pint until the innkeeper at the Red Lion said, Farmer Brown, I think I've taken enough of your money. What's wrong with you? Farmer Brown said, oh, it's terrible, right? I bought all of this fields, all my money into it, and there's just those little stones in it. It just, I got. The innkeeper said, now you pull yourself together, man. If there is a problem and you can't fix it, we're a few centuries ahead of the A-team here, so what we do in Martlesham is we go down Martlesham Creek. And in Martlesham Creek, there is old Mary. And old Mary, different old Mary to the one before. Old Mary, she can solve any problem for you. So, Farmer Brown, he staggered out of that pub. And he staggered across the path and he made his way through the woods. And that kind of sobers you up because it's quite marshy down there. So his boots were getting stuck in the mud, but he got to the edge of the creek. And sure enough, at the edge of the creek, there was a little hut. And he went up to the hut and he knocked on the door. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have something to knock on, now's the time to knock on it. And that door opened with a creak. You can give me a creak if you like. And there in the doorway stood old Mary, an old woman hunched over, more lines on her face than it looked like there was face for. He said, you right there, Farmer Brown? He said, never mind. Old Mary said, you better come on in, boy, sit down. And he sat down by old Mary's stove. And he told her his problems. And old Mary said, I see what your problem is, and I will give you advice, but I demand a price for it. And Farmer Brown said, yes, whatever you want. She said, I would like half a slaughtered pig for my meat. I would like you to bring me a bag of grain so I can make my bread, and a barrow full of wood that'll see me through the winter. Farmer Brown said, oh yes, fine. Yeah, if you can solve the problem, that's totally fine. She said, right. What you need to do is find the mother stone. You see, the thing is, all of them little stones, they're just the children. And if you keep taking the children away, well, that mother, she'll just keep having more children, won't she? What you need to do is find somewhere in that field there'll be the mother stone. And when you find the mother stone, you'll know it when you see it, because it's like a big old round stone with a hole in the middle, and it's got lots of those little children's stones in it. Find that, take it out of the field, and when you've done that, you will see that you will have no more troubles. Now, don't you forget to pay me. Farmer Brown said, oh, thank you so much. I won't, and I'll go and I'll sort it out. So Farmer Brown went home that night. And sure enough, the next morning he remembered. Amazing. He actually remembered what old Mary said. And he got all those villagers of Martlesham, and he got them to go and look for the mother stone. Well, they all searched through the first field, couldn't find anything at all. And then they all searched through the second field, couldn't find anything at all. And then finally, right at the corner of the third field, there she was. Huge round stone with a hole in the middle and lots of little stones in her. Well, the boy who found her picked her up and with everyone's help carried them all the way back to Farmer Brown's house. And Farmer Brown gave him the shiniest penny he had. And he took that mother stone and he put it, didn't really know what to do with it. He put it in a box, left it in the kitchen. We went to sleep that night. He thought, right, all the stones are cleared, and the mother stone, I've got her, so my field will be fine. He went to sleep that night, and he didn't sleep that well, and he wasn't quite sure why. There was kind of a murmuring, a sort of noise. But the next morning, he didn't mind, because when he went out, no more little stones. And the ploughman could plough the field, and they started ploughing it, and they started sowing the seed, and he went to bed that night happy. But just as he was getting off to sleep, he heard this noise, like a sobbing, like a he worked out where it was coming from. And he looked around his house, and he thought it was coming from the kitchen. Not maybe his wife was crying, maybe it was something like that, but there was no one in the kitchen. And he kept hearing the sound. And when he looked, and he put his ear to it, he could hear what was coming from the box. He got a bit frightened. He wrapped the box up, and he took it down to his cellar, and he put it right underneath the house, and slammed the trapdoor to the cellar, and he went back to bed, and he didn't worry about it anymore. And the next morning, the ploughing carried on, and the seed sowing carried on, but when he went to bed that night, the sobbing got louder. And then about 3 o'clock in the morning, he started hearing crying, like 1,000 different cries coming from outside the house. And it went on all through the night. And no matter how much he stuffed his hands over his ears or he put his pillow over his head, nothing could make it go away. And when he woke up the next morning, well, the ploughing was carried on, but he was so distraught by that sound, he couldn't think what to do, so he did what he'd done before. He went down the pub. And when he got to the pub, he started drinking pint after pint after pint after pint until eventually the innkeeper said, "That's enough of your money there, Farmer Brown. What seems to be the trouble this time?" Well, Farmer Brown said, "Oh, it's terrible. I mean, my fields, they're just, they're great, but there's this noise, this crying noise that just won't stop." The innkeeper said, "Well, did you do what old Mary told you?" He said, "Yeah, I did exactly what she told me." He said, "And did you pay her?" He went, "I didn't pay her. She's put a curse on me. Oh my God, you send your boy to my house and you get yourself a half a pig she wanted and a bag of wheat that was and a barrow full of wood. You send the boy and I'll go and tell her now and she'll lift that curse." Well, in his drunken state, he went staggering through the woods. He was even more stuck in the mud this time, but eventually he got to that little hut on the creek and he knocked on the door. You can knock on the door. And old Mary, she opened the door with a creak. And she looked at Farmer Brown. She went, "Thought I'd be seeing you then." He said, "Oh, sorry. So I've been so hungry. I was just fancying myself a bit of pork, Just thought I'd have a bit of bread, and then I looked and there was no grain. And here I am, cold and shivering, Farmer Brown. He said, "I'm so sorry. Please, will you lift the curse?" "What do you mean, curse? I'm not a witch, for goodness sake. Sit down." He said, "Well, what is it? If it's not a curse, what is it?" She said, "Well, I've had dealings with your sort before. And there was a little bit of information that I didn't quite give you because I was waiting for my payment." He said, "Well, just tell me now." And she said, "Well, I thought it was obvious. I told you that was the Mother Stone. I told you that those were its children. Now you tell me, what do you think happens if a mother can't see its children?" Well, she weeps, doesn't she? She weeps and she weeps and she weeps, and them children, when they might like being outside for a while, but if they don't see their mother, then they start weeping as well, and that's all that is. If you want the weeping to stop, you need to put the mother where she can see her children, and the children where they can see their mother." Farmer Brown said, "Wait, I don't understand." She said, "You put that Mother Stone in your window and everything will be fine. The noise will stop." Just then, the boy from the pub arrived with half the slaughtered pig and a bag of wheat and a barrow full of wood. Farmer Brown said, "Well, there you go. There's your payment. Thank you. Sure there's nothing else?" Old Mary said, "There's nothing else. Go about your way, Farmer Brown." Well, Farmer Brown went back. And even though it was late at night, he went down into his cellar and he opened that box and he picked up the Mother Stone and he put her in the big bay window. And instantly, the crying stopped and the noise stopped. And from that day to this, well, from that day until Farmer Brown's dying day, he had no problem. Those fields produced good crops. But the trouble with not listening to the old folks is those stories didn't get carried down. So without knowing about the Mother Stone, well, the fields filled up again with the tiny stones and they became unplowable, and so they stopped being farmland and they got sold off and they got built on, and the retail park was there with the Tesco's and the Pets at Home and the Next and the Poundland. But in old Martlesham, where there are still fields and still ploughed, you will see in the windows the big Mother Stones. And I know that to be true because there was just such a stone in the window of the old lady who told this story to Terry, who told it to me. And that's the story of the Mother Stone of Martlesham.
Hey, oh, I love that.
Very much.
I love that story.
It's a fabulous story.
And you brought back all that stuff of Martlesham Creek, and I used to go tatting around there and go and collect scrap from sort of old farms in the middle of the woods and stuff like that. Oh, brilliant! And
it's really interesting.
I mean, in Ipswich, we don't pronounce the full word. We call it Gipswick. We don't we drop one syllable out of it.
You don't need that.
But then you're from north of there, so
it's a different part of Suffolk. You see, I'm kind of on the border of Norfolk and Suffolk.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about that story is that the only kind of one similar to that I've heard is an Irish story, and what's really fascinating about that is that so they say that some of the building materials, I can't remember what it was, that is in the White House in America was taken from around Martlesham Creek area. So my feeling is that maybe it kind of made its way to Ireland along the way, and I don't know whether that story went from Martlesham to Ireland or it came back again, but it feels like it probably came along that route. But it's fascinating, and I've still kind of haven't. So I've seen one reference to the word Motherstone of Martlesham, but never the story. But that is the end of our session for tonight, but we are absolutely up for some more chatting. But if you could just put your hands together for the stories that we've heard tonight and for Shane telling. If you've enjoyed tonight, I'm just going to stick the links for chucking some money in our virtual hats in the chat. But does anyone have any questions, any things they want to say or things they want to know about the stories or about East Anglian culture or Storm from the East or Suffolk generally? Give us a shout.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go.
Where and how do I use this hat they keep on? Where the fuck is it? How do I put money in it?
I love you, Peter, so much. Can you see on your screen right now, down the bottom, the thing that says chat?
Yes.
If you click on chat, you will see the last thing that I put in there is 2 links.
Oh, right.
So you can either click on the first link, which will take you to my page on the World Storytelling Cafe. There you will see a little picture of a hat. Click on that, and then you put in how much you want to pay. Or you can go straight to the PayPal bit, which is the one underneath, which also will ask you how much you want to pay. The only thing you have to do is have a card set up or a bank account linked to those things, but it should take you through that the second you get there.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not
in general, that's a really good question on the live stuff. Yeah, I mean, to get to that generally, you go back to the World Storytelling page, because if we're on gallery here, there's no hat showing. So go back to the page you came from to get here, and then you'll see the hat.
But like I say, the link is in the chat. So
I thank you for that, Justine. What I've got to do now is to go through all my little books and things to find out if I actually am a member of PayPal. If I'm not, then I will join up and possibly tomorrow send you something. All right. Technology, I bloody hate it. Why can't it just be a slot here in my iPad? It's not. No, I'm not on an iPad at the moment, am I? No, that's another confusing thing. You see, on my what's this one called? This is a anyway. Whatever it is, why is there not a bloody slot in here where I can just put it in? It will come about one day, won't it?
It will.
Can I tell you a very quick story? You see, I was very happy. I had this computer, one of these tower things, years ago, and I was very happy with that. And then I ventured into having. That's what it's called. It's called a laptop. I ventured into a. That's what I've got here now. I ventured into the world of laptop. Then I made the mistake. Well, I didn't make the mistake. I rather love him actually. I went to see my brother. You see, up in Lancashire. No, it wasn't Yorkshire. Somewhere up there anyway. In Cumbria. That's where he was then. And I hadn't been there 2 days. He said, "Oh, by the way, I'm showing you this. Look what I've got, Peter." I said, "What is that?" And he said, "This is an iPad." He said, "Yes, you need to get this." I said, "Yeah." I had a look at it and I thought, do I anyway, he convinced me, and off he went to Kendall or Keswick, whichever one it was. Keswick it was. Kendall's whatever. That's off. And we got myself a iPad, and I'm really, really chuffed with that. And I can't wait to get it home. And I get it home, and my boys come round, and I say, "Lads, look what I've got. I've got an iPad." Cool. Yes, yeah. Now what you need is an iPhone. I said, yes, they said. So off I go the next day or the day after, get an iPhone. And you know what? And excuse my language, I can't tell what's going fucking ding dong, ding bang. I don't know where it's coming from, bloody well.
Oh, bless you, Peter.
And we all sympathise, Peter.
I have it ready. All I need is a slot in my left laptop.
Oh, genius.
Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to share or say or ask Shane or I that isn't about technology, not to do with tales or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just up that A12. You know, there's just so many stories. Toby up near Waldronfield.
Yeah.
You know, who was the black soldier who was drawn behind a. He was in there in the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
So you know, and there's just the place is full of stories.
Yeah, I mean, one of my earliest memories of stories, you know, when my parents used to take me, we used to go to two places when we went out. We either went to Walberswick Beach or we went to Dunwich Forest. And I remember my dad, as we were walking around Dunwich Forest at dusk, just scaring us witless with stories of like the man that used to walk around Dunwich Forest like with his dog, and we always thought we were going to see him, you know. And I don't remember that much because I was very little at the time, you know, so I just remember that kind of image, you know, which will always stay with me. But I think Suffolk has so many. I really love the fact that Suffolk's kind of stories are all about mysterious people and often from other lands, and all the stuff about kind of the UFO landings in Rendlesham in the 50s feel like they are kind of, they follow that precedent that comes from like the Wild Man, which is in my other set that you can kind of check out online, and the Green Children. You know, we have this kind of history of people coming that, you know, seem other, you know, and there's always someone that looks after them and someone that rejects them. You know, that's kind of yeah, it's really
the Red Barn murder is really interesting to me. I ought to learn a bit more to tell it, because where I grew up in Bury St Edmunds, the museum had his death mask, a book bound in his skin, and also half of his skull with an ear in a box. And he was the man who murdered, I can't remember the woman's name, but he murdered her.
I think Suzanne Arnold tells that story, doesn't she? I've definitely heard her tell it kind of back in the day. Yeah.
Very powerful story.
And I mean, it got popularised in a play, didn't it, at the time?
Yeah.
It was a sort of Victorian melodrama, Murder in the Red Barn.
Yeah, exactly.
And
but that's a true story.
And it's put on with regularity by amateur dramatic groups throughout Suffolk, usually borrowing a barn to do it in.
Yeah. We do like a bit of gruesomeness here in Suffolk. There was a lovely art exhibition to do with it a couple of years ago as well. So it's like, again, this idea of Storm from the East celebrating our East Anglian culture, and actually, you know, that was a very gruesome story. But I mean, there's folk songs about it, there's art being made about it. So it's, you know, we celebrate the dark side very much in Suffolk. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to ask? No. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this something you guys have thought about doing on a sort of regular or irregular basis? It sounds like there's certainly the basis of a regular event, a couple of times a year.
You know, the idea of Storm from the East is to kind of like bring together different art forms, like, and storytelling, obviously, and music and everything. And I guess now, you know, this is really the start of conversations about what it might be, because it kind of has to come out of people that are either based in East Anglia or have come from East Anglia, so that it's celebrating the kind of the work in this area. And I think I'm the kind of person that just like, you know, I'll start. I very much leap before you're ready. So here's an idea. I'm going to do something and then see what happens. Which is so that's kind of where we're at. But yeah, I'm hoping there will be more stuff coming out of it. You know, that's the kind of joy of lockdown, isn't it? We have a bit of thinking space to kind of go, what next?
Mm.
But yeah, that's the plan. So hopefully more things to come as I discover more.
And what is next on here?
Yes, John. What's
If I
next on here?
if I can get that, is tomorrow. Tomorrow is Giles and James back again with their Viking stories and illustrations going with it, which has been amazing. On Sunday we got your mate Baden, Yusfu Jallo. Is it Jallo?
Oh, the Calford Mustafa Jallo. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that. So he's live.
Mm.
So that's you know, you can come on and give him a hard time if you want, Baden. And
allowed.
there's and then Monday we got and this is I'm really looking forward to this. I look forward to all of it actually. There's
But this is a bit special on Monday, isn't it, John?
yeah, it's Amy Douglas who's been doing this big project on Duncan Williamson. She was an apprentice to Duncan Williamson, who's great Scottish traveller storyteller that I rattle on about all the time, and there's literally hundreds of reel-to-reel tapes with stories, and she's been going through those and taking those stories, and she's retelling some. So we're talking. So the whole subject of the Monday magazine is talking about Duncan, and so she's going to be there talking about it. It's sort of. She was supposed to do a public performance, but of course that hasn't happened. And she had a bit of funding off the Arts Council to do this. So we've sort of hijacked her, and I put her there. So that is going to be. I'm really looking forward to that. And I know Shane, you got lots of questions about Duncan and stuff.
Well, so I've got a little something that I can share with you a bit, actually, John, which you might not be aware of. Is I'm involved with another festival next weekend, and we're going to have Amy for about an hour and a half talking about Duncan and possibly telling some stories, and I shall be interviewing her.
Excellent. Yeah, I think she mentioned that.
So I will advertise it. I will advertise it probably beginning of next week.
And so that's what's coming up. We got we got Maria Credelli on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday night we've got a new teller, one that I haven't heard before and hadn't been on, the Jiva Raghunath, who's from Bengal. And so it goes on, and so it goes on. We expand around the world.
Non-stop.
But fantastic. And but I'll be announcing all that on Monday, obviously. But right now, I think we all need to give Justine and Shane a huge round of applause.
Thank you, guys. That was fantastic.
Thank you. That was a pleasure. Thank you for having us. And we will no doubt be back soon. But yeah, check out the rest of the stuff on the site, because there is some awesome stuff there. But unless anyone has more things to say, then we should probably let these lovely people go.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, and thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys.
Lovely to see lots of people on there. Aidan, Stephanie.
Okay.